And we're back, and it's COMP2068. That's for the winter 2016 semester. We're advanced web programming, and it's week 4, lesson 4, part 1. I can't believe it already, week 4. A month's gone by, and let's talk about what we're going to do today. So a couple things. One, we're going to do this little lab, and it's due by the end of day. So it's replacing our quiz because we did that little survey. So by the end of day, that means like midnight tonight, this Express app that we're going to build, and it's going to be deployed to your choice of Azure or Heroku. It's up to you, or maybe both if you want to challenge yourself. This is what it's going to do. So what I need from you is to use the Express generator, which we haven't talked about yet. We're going to format it in the way that we like, right? So we can talk about how we move things around, move the files, kind of describe what this whole thing is. That's what is an Express generator anyway. And once we get all that piece done, right, deploy on Azure. My goal for the end of the day is to deploy on Azure or Heroku. And then whatever I'm doing, and if you're smart, as we go, you set up a file called something like COMP2068 lab 3, right? Just saying, right? And then we're done, submit. We're good to go, right? So you don't have to spend tonight. If you can't make it work for whatever reason, though, then that's where you need tonight to kind of bang out the issues. And of course, I'm going to have an example online of a working version, most likely, right? If I can do everything correctly, so you can certainly follow along. It's for you. The reason I'm giving you this is because I don't want a problem going forward. If like next week is your stuff is due, and then you have a problem with this is a problem, right? We have to talk about that. So let's bang this out. Last week we kind of did this lab as well, and look what I said here. Your server.js has to be exposed, and still people are deploying and it's not working. Why do you think that is? Server.js is not exposed in Azure, most likely. Chances are. You don't have a server.js on Azure, not going to work. Doesn't matter what it says in package.json. Okay? FYI. Let's look at this thing and let's talk about Express. I've got this little PowerPoint that I'm going to look at right now. It's called Express.js, lesson 4. It's up on your blackboard there that I'm going to follow. So you have it as well in PDF format. And I'm just going to zoom in here to talk about this. We're going to be talking about the Express middleware. We're going to use Twitter Bootstrap for our layout. So we're not expecting you to know to use CSS or be a CSS master in this course. In fact, we're like other courses we do when we do technology like this, we assume that you know something about CSS and something about HTML, a semantic HTML. So we don't focus on those two things. We focus more on, as an example, the technology behind everything, right? So it's okay to use Bootstrap as a CSS framework for this course. Okay, it's okay. You're not going to cheat. It's not cheating to do it. It's perfectly acceptable. If you don't like Bootstrap and you want to use Zurb, right, Foundation, now it would be Foundation 6 now. I think they're at Foundation 6 now. That's perfectly acceptable too. You don't have to use Bootstrap. Bootstrap is just a front-end CSS framework and JavaScript framework that helps us make our websites responsive, right? So that they work on mobile phones as well, right? All right, so I mean, we talked last week about Node.js a little bit more, and over the last couple of weeks actually. And one of the questions I always get is, why do we use Node at all? Why do we use Express at all? Why don't we just use traditional services, right? Why don't we just stick to PHP or ASP.NET or whatever, right? Remember what we're doing with Node. What we're doing with Node is we're creating a small server, the smallest piece. Node is almost like the smallest piece you can get. You get a lot of core functionality just with Node alone, right? So you can make a server that speaks JavaScript as opposed to a server that speaks another language like PHP or ASP.NET, C#. Right? Whatever it's going to be, right? You want to match up those two. We found that when we test, when JavaScript talks to JavaScript, it's good, right? And also from a developer perspective, you don't have to juggle knowing two languages because now you're looking at two different sets of syntax, right? And so on. Also from a speed perspective, we also found that JavaScript, which is normally blocking, right? With Node it does a lot of asynchronous calls to the server, so it produces almost like a non-blocking code. So it doesn't, because remember, think about blocking as call waiting. All right, I always like to think about call waiting. I always like this example, right? So I'm calling Cindy, right? So and then Lucy's calling Cindy at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm choosing them because they're right in front of me, right? So I'm calling Cindy up. Cindy answers the phone. Cindy answers the phone. Yeah. Okay. So Cindy answers the phone, right? So she's on the phone. I'm on the phone with her, right? Now Lucy's calling, right? You hear the call waiting signal, right? You transfer her temporarily and say, I'll be right with you. You're going to have to wait. So now she's in waiting mode. That's blocking. I have to finish my call with Cindy before Cindy can talk with Lucy. Okay, a blocking, fully blocked scenario, right? Where one thing has to function before another one, right? Asynchronous means, now, I don't know how Cindy's going to do this, but she can talk to Ari, she can talk to all kinds of people in the class, right? All at the same time, in little bits and pieces. She can say, hi, hello, I want to, and she can send little packets of information to all of us all at the same time. She doesn't have to, just communicate with me, right? So from a server perspective, that's how it kind of works anyway. We almost like work with different processes, right? So almost think about this big process pool. And I'm going to go into this process pool and pull a process down, or a thread. We call them threads as well, right? We pull a thread in from the thread pool, right? And I'm going to take a thread. Whenever I connect with Cindy's server, she's the server, I connect with her, right? As an example, I take a thread from the thread pool. So do you, and so do you. Typically, that's how it works. With Node, it's a single thread application, right? That is asynchronous. So it does basically what it does is it's like a true multitasking system. And what we found is if you take a Node server like that, and bigger, even places that do e-commerce, they use it as well. Like for example, Walmart is a good example of a Node.js user. They were the first adopters, if you will. You can actually have faster response time, especially during peak periods, with something like a Node.js than a PHP or an ASP.NET. So just from a performance perspective, there's performance involved, right? So there's many reasons why this is coming into being. And it's almost like this is one of the reasons why, and I like to call this is the age of the rise of JavaScript. JavaScript is coming out of the depths of being a funny language that people don't like to being a really powerful, flexible, object-oriented, development environment, right? Where you can make any app you want across any platform, right? So that's why we use Node. We use Node because, it's non-blocking. It allows us to do, kind of respond on a single thread. We've done this kind of stuff before where when we run a Node application, we go Node and whatever the JS file is called. So Node server or Node server JS. That's perfectly fine, right? We've talked about these things before. One of the things we really haven't talked about too much before as we go through this, and this is just a kind of a revamp, a review of the stuff we've talked about, is this idea of this Kinect middleware. So again, we have this need, right, to have this HTTP module that we use to listen to, for example, calls to a specific port. And you know what? When we use just Node by itself, it's the core functionality. There's not a lot we can do with it beyond its regular capacity. When we layer Express, which is, by the way, based on an older technology called Kinect. Kinect was the first module that they came out with that gave Node more functionality. It almost expanded Node's capabilities, right? So whenever we think about Node programming, Node.js, always think about it as I have a core module, and now I'm adding additional modules on top of it. And another great example for this is this. You're a superhero, and all you have is body armor, right? That's all you know how to do. You have no super strength, you have no flight, you have no speed, you have no supervision, you have none of that. All you have is body armor, so you can take a lot of hits, right? So someone can pound the crap out of you, but you're going to be okay, right? Because pretty much you're invulnerable. Nothing can hurt you. But you can't do anything else. You can't pound anybody. You can't defend the good. You can't fly. You can't teleport. You can't do any of that stuff. It's almost like that's what Node is. So imagine I have a modular hero, Node.js, and I add on flight. Now he can fly too, right? He's not just invulnerable, but I can fly as well. It's a module that I've added on to the superhero to give him more superheroic powers, right? That's why I look at it when I think about Node, right? Or, you know what? I'm going to add in X-ray vision because I want to look through buildings and maybe other things, right? So X-ray vision, right? So that gives me more power, right? That kind of stuff. Or maybe I want to get something else like teleportation because I'm always late, right? And my hero wants to be on time to save, the regular people, right? The mundanes against the evil, villains, right? That kind of stuff. So of course we have some other kind of, modules we add on. So that's Node. Think about Node as like the bare basic module, like bareback. Like we're talking about like nothing. There's nothing there, right? And then there's some core functionality. As we add additional modules on, right? Express being one of the most popular modules to add, right? You gain functionality. You gain superpowers, right? That's how you have to think about it. Okay. People don't understand that. They're like, why Express? Why am I using Express? What, is Node and Express the same thing? Yes. Node is the base module, and I'm building Express on top of it. Right? I'm actually expanding Node and extending it, so now it has more superpowers. Okay? All right, so the Kinect module is the piece that Express was built on. And what it allows us to do is create this tighter little connection. It looks just like this. This is what Kinect would look like. And as you can see, it looks very Express-like, right? Just like when we first built our Express module last week, we did it just like this. We created a connection. Instead of connect, it just said Express. var would be equal to Express, and then we listened on port 3000, and then we have some routing that we would do with app.get as an example to listen for any kind of GET request to get the website, and then we would route them to the correct place. So that's what we do with Express. And you could do this. You could actually do npm install -- save Kinect, but again, normally we don't use Kinect anymore because it's the old way of doing things. So this is where Express came from, right? I'm just going to skip down here a couple ways, right, until we get to this Express stuff. Okay. And this is really good. It comes kind of right from the book that we're using. And there is a book. What's the book? Anyone know? There's actually a book that we use, right? And some people ask, Tom, what's the book that we're using? Is there a book with this course? Absolutely. And if you remember the outline that we had at the beginning of when we were together, the first day, let me show you that outline somewhere. Here's my syllabus for winter 2016, right? If you look at the outline, in the outline itself is a book that's called Mean Web Development from Pact. That's the one, 2014. If you actually look that up, and you can also buy from Pact. It's not very expensive. It's like $10 or something like that, right? It's a really good book, and if you follow the examples in the book, I'm actually following one after the other. I'm actually building on the examples that they've got in the book. So there is a book. If you ever wanted to look and see what the book is, that's the book. It's called Mean Web Development from Pact. And if I was to look it up and give you an example of what it looks like, Pact. And I'll show you the image of what the book looks like. It's this book with this flamingo. Thank you. That's on the front, right? That's what it looks like. If you see this book, then you've got the right book. And that's the book that we're following, okay? So it's not like I'm coming out with this from nowhere. It's like we're physically following a plan that comes right from the book, okay? Okay, let's continue. So going back to this then, with this Express framework built on this old Kinect module that we used to use as middleware to connect, to add additional functionality into Node, right, is what we're going to be using today. And we built this last week. We did kind of this app use or app get, where we have this particular route, and then we send a hello world, or what we did last week, we used send file with dir name to kind of send a specific route. That's what we did, okay? But what if, instead of using, this application, this Express application, by the way, these are the typical methods you'll see: app set, app get, app engine, which is the type of template engine where you're going to use. For example, HTML, or for example, Ejs or whatever, which is what we're going to be using today. We're going to be using Ejs Templating Engine, right? I mean, it allows us to use things like very similar to what it looks like with PHP. See, with PHP, you do these import statements kind of thing, and what you do is you can have different piece parts of your HTML documents as templates. So if I have the head of my document as a template, and I have the footer of my document as a template, and then I have my content, I can have all these different templates in there, and as I modify those templates, I have functionality. I can build out my application and scale it out, right? And I can keep those separate, those templates, from the actual rendered views, which we're going to see. Okay? So part of the thing when we take on a scaffold, first we have to understand this stuff. What is it coming from? It's coming from the Express module. Okay? The other place to check is online. If I go to Express, just from a documentation perspective, and if I go to getting started, notice that there's a space here for Express generator. So let's follow these steps, because hey, we're making the lab today. FYI, hint, hint. Let's do it together, peoples, right? As opposed to doing it later on. So what am I going to do first? Well, there's a couple of approaches here, but I like to use my Express generator in my own folder of my own choosing, my own name, right? So I'm going to create a folder in here, new folder, and I'm just going to call this thing COMP2068, right? And we're going to call this Lab 3, right? Just to, you know, give you hints on what to do here to get full 100% on the lab, right? Okay, cool. Here's Lab 3, and I want to put my Express generator to work in there, right? Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. First, let's go back to this and take a look at stuff what we need to do. I need to install the Express-generator module in the global scope, right? Just to be sure that I have the latest version, I'll do it with you. All right, so let's take a look. It's probably going to screw me up, but hey, why not, right? So it's Npm Install, right, Express-generator, and then -G for global. Right? That's what you want to do in the global scope. So it's going to go out there, grab the latest Express generator. Notice my version is 4.13.1. Right? You should be the same, right? Then what I can do is, notice that it says Express-H, the next option. Well, H stands for handlebars or Hogan, right? This is the other one. I think it's HBS is handlebars. Ejs is -E, right? And this is the one I want. So I want to say Express- and then the type of templating engine. I want to use Ejs, so we're going to say E for Ejs, okay? You can also choose other things. For example, things like if I want to use Sass and Compass for my CSS, and there's other things I can do, right? I can also use the -F switch when I use the Express generator, so I can force it on a non-empty directory. If I want to force my folder structure on a non-empty directory, it'll force it on, it'll actually put it in there and overwrite everything if I really want to. Not a great idea, but sometimes necessary, okay? The most popular one, the default engine, if you just put in Express, just by itself, Express, right? The default engine is Jade, which some people really like because it's very simple, right? I'll tell you that for me, I prefer Ejs, and the book that we're using is also using Ejs, and that's why I've chosen that, okay? Not because you can't choose another templating engine like Jade or Handlebars or something else. Especially if you're used to using a templating engine, an HTML templating engine before. By the way, Handlebars came out, you know, before. This is something that just we're using here in Node.js. So here's what you can do. You can say, if you have if you don't have a working directory, you can make a directory called My App. So if I say Express My App, that's going to make a new folder, let's say on your desktop, called My App, and using the Jade templating engine by default, because I haven't specified -E. If I don't say -E, it's going to put Jade in there for you, and that's wrong. We don't want Jade, right? So that's the thing we have to do. And I could also do, once we've installed Express, we want to do an Npm install. Npm install is going to take all the modules, the node modules that are included in the default package.json file that's included with my Express generator, and download them and install them into your application. Because other than that, right, they will not be included in there. So if you're someone who hasn't done an Npm install, that's why Express is not working for you, right? You can't just run Express and expect it to work off the cuff. Now there's different ways to run it, and we'll talk about this. And there's also some structure. Look at the code structure here. So I've got my app.js, which is exposed. Does Microsoft work with app.js? No. So this will not work. And that's why you're having troubles, people, right? If you try and log on to Microsoft and make it work, there's occasion where this will not work. You have to configure it a little differently than this. Who is successful with this structure as is on Azure? As is, it worked, right? Sometimes it won't. Just FYI, right? And for that, what I'd like to do is pull out the www file. It's not a JS file or anything. It's just a www file that's in our bin folder. Pull it out and call it server.js. That is a safe route. And in order for us to do that, we have to do some renaming of paths. Right, just ahead of time, just letting you know this is what's going to happen. I have to rename my path names because it's going to point to app up a step, right? It's going to say go up a step and get to the app, right? App.js. Well, I'm not going to be up a step. I'm going to be on the same level. So I'm going to have to change in my pathing for app. It's going to go from ... to just . And we're going to look at that in the path. That's one of the changes we're going to have to make. Okay. So I need to expose that. That's one thing I noticed. Notice also I get something called a public folder. My public folder, right, is going to be added to my path. This piece here is always added to my path. I don't have to say public JavaScripts. It's not going to say that. I just have to refer to the JavaScript, and it's automatically included in my file. So we'll take a look and see how that works. Okay. And the other option is same thing for style sheets. Our style sheets in a path style sheet is automatically included in here. Routes is a separate file. Now, what are these routes? Do they belong to server or do they belong to client? Where would you put them? If I was going to make two folders, one server, one client, where do you think routes would go, right? It'd be kind of in a server folder, right? If I was going to encapsulate my route folder in another folder, it'd be in the server side, right? So this is the structure I'm going to use. I'm going to make two basic parts of it. I'm going to make one, I'm going to leave one that says public. I can rename it to client if I want to. Let's leave it as public for now. And then I'll make another arm called server, right? So server is where everything is going to be from the server. It's going to handle things like all my routing, right? It might even handle all my views, because those are back-end views. There's a difference between back-end views in templating and front-end views. We'll talk about that as we get to Angular, right? Angular has its own templating engine, right? And some people choose not to use Express, the Express templating engine, with Angular, right? They just said, let's just use Angular on the front end. However, they two can talk to each other, right? So you could use something like Ejs and Angular, which is what we're going to be doing, all right, to show you both. And there's going to be some advantages and disadvantages of using both systems. So there's 7 directories and 9 files as part of the Express generator. This is a scaffold that's going to come out. One other thing, I want you to notice that TypeScript is not being used here, right? So if I want code hinting, I need to incorporate TypeScript into my files. And Express is broken, my friends, right, when it comes to to TypeScript. I got to fix it, and I got to incorporate TSD. I got to add in Bower. I got to do all that front-end work to make my application scalable and smart so that I can do all my code hinting. Otherwise, 0 code hinting in Express with Express Generator, right? And that's bad, because that means that if you forget something or whatever, you can look at some examples, but the code hinting really helps because it'll solve your problems. It'll debug things for you, and then suddenly you'll go, oh yeah, I forgot to put that, or I mistyped this piece. You won't get that if you don't use the TypeScript, and that's why I use TypeScript all the time. All right, let's try this out and see what happens. So I need to do this Express, and I want to go into my folder. I already have a folder called with the name that I want, which is right here, right? Here it is. I need to navigate to that folder, right? So I'm going to do a CD, and you can do this, by the way, on Mac and on Windows machines. Go CD, and I'm going to take my folder and drag it into my terminal or command prompt, right? This will give me the exact path that I need to go to navigate to that folder. Now, this is before we do any kind of Visual Studio Code or anything like that, right? Because we don't want Visual Studio Code to have anything to do with it yet, okay? Trust me. If I do an ls or an ls.al on Linux machines, notice that I have nothing in the folder. The folder is completely empty. There's no Git repository. There's nothing, which is how it should be, okay? I'm going to type in Express -e. And if everything is configured properly, if I press Enter, it's going to do this, right? Do you have this? If you don't have this, something is wrong. No one's saying anything, so that means I'm assuming everything's right. Yay! Cool. Well, we're in here already. If I do a list now, right, notice that, I'll do it up here so you can see it. Notice that I got an app.js, a bin, a package.json, a public, a routes, and a views, exactly like it says. I need to do an npm install, right? Because if I don't do an npm install, I won't have any access to my files. So let's just do that. So we'll say npm install. Yay. What it's going to do, it's going to go out on the web and grab all the required npm modules. These are all of them, right? Like lots of them. And install them, and it's going to create its own folder called node modules. Do I ever want to put my node modules up online? No. So that means I need a gitignore file. This is where we start using our Visual Studio Code. And before I go there, I'm going to start off bare bones. So there's not going to be Visual Studio Code with TypeScript, just JavaScript. Let's take a look at that. And then we'll look at the structure, we'll restructure, and we'll add TypeScript after, right? Because we want to add it for support as we scale out our application, right? Let's do that. So I don't need this window right now. I'll put it aside. I'm going to pull up my Visual Studio Code, which I have another application I've got here. I'm going to drag and drop my COMP2068 Lab 3 and put it into this pane right here. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at our package.json file. Whoa. Couple problems here. This is the old way of doing it. And also version 000 is probably not right. I probably want to put in something like 001. I also want to change my package.json so that this is all lowercase. And this is trying to match up with my file name or my folder name structure. Right? So I'm going to go COMP2068 and then slab3. Right? It's important to try and do this, guys. Here's something. We have us under scripts. This is a new property of our JSON file. This is just a JSON document, right? And notice that inside of our JSON, we have several properties. A name property, a version property, a private, is it private or not? A scripts property. Look at what my start script does. If I do npm space start, it's going to launch, actually, is an alias for node./bin www, which means that if I go into my bin and look at my www file, it looks like this. And this, my friends, is just a server.js file that's been split off two pieces. One that takes care of server errors and connections. An example of that would be I'm connecting to my server, and it has something called a process. Here's my process. Notice how there's an underline here. Because I don't understand what that is. And it does this whole process.env port, right, that we saw before. It does all that piece for you. It normalizes the port, right? There's a special normalized port method that it uses. And it chooses either that port or port 3000, depending on one or the other. That's all it does. And then it sets the port variable to the port that we're using right here. So I app set. So when I say port, anytime I refer to port in quotations, it means this port variable. It's just making an alias. So a lot of stuff going on in the background. And if you don't understand this stuff, you're like, what's going on? It's a lot of stuff I don't get. Tom didn't talk about this stuff, and it's here. What do I do? Don't cry, right? It's just we have to reorganize things, right? So what I have to do is this. Let's move our www file. First of all, let's rename it. And there's a couple ways to do that. Here inside our document, I'm going to rename this thing. So I'm going to go rename, and we're going to call this thing server.js because I need that. I need it, right, for Azure. No, if I don't have this in server.js, Azure sometimes will not run. And same thing goes with something like a Heroku. It needs a direction. Give Heroku or Azure an endpoint. If you don't give them an endpoint, it doesn't know what to do, won't run properly sometimes. Okay, it can't be in our bin folder. That's wrong. I got to pull this out. I'm going to pull this out in the same level as my app.js. Yay, cool. Notice that my app.js normally would be up a level, but it's on the same level. So I got to go in here and change this ... to a single dot. And a single dot is like saying, look at the same folder level. That's what it means across different platforms. All right, so you may have not seen this structure before. You may have been used to just app, but this is more of a relative path. The way we do relative path with Node on the back end, we use the / format to indicate on the same level. So if I want to access a folder on the same level, I go / and then the folder name, all right, or the file name, okay? Now in this case, I would have gone up one, right? So /app is what I'm going to do, and that's equal to this file or this variable called app. So I'm actually saying require my app. Remember, I did requires before with modules, where I'm requiring a whole module, like for example, HTTP or Express. Here, I can use require, but instead of requiring a whole module, I'm requiring a whole file. And what this does is it takes that file that this refers to and slips it into the place on line 7. Think about taking that whole file, app.js, and pouring it into line 7. That's what it does. So at line 7, it executes everything from app.js. That's what it does, all right? So when I do this kind of include, all this stuff from app.js gets included right there. That's one, okay? So I need to do that. So here's my server.json and app.js. I don't need my bin anymore. Let's get rid of it. So I'll highlight my bin, right, and then delete. Cool. All right. I got to change my package.json because my start points to bin www, but I don't need that. It should just point to server.js, right? So let's do that. Right? Definitely got to change that, right? That makes sense to change. Yes? No. Because if you notice, my package.json it's not using relative path and just I'm just using this right here, right? Notice also that it uses certain modules like debug, cookie parser, body parser, express, Morgan, serve, favicon, all the stuff that it loads in. And this is where, when I did an npm install, it went out to these dependencies because someone, when they built this express generator, used the ---- save equivalent to build out an application that we can use to scaffold our apps, right? Okay, cool. So let's test it as is to make sure that we're good, right? Because I made some changes, and who knows if it works. Let's check it. So I'm going to go out to the command line. I'm going to go open in terminal, right? Or in your case, it might be the command prompt. I'm just going to close this tab just to make sure it's one tab. And let's run npm start. If I did everything correctly, then I should be listening on port 3000. If you didn't do something right, and if you didn't change your package.json, or if you didn't pull things out of the www file, it will not run. It'll give you an error. Who gets an error? You didn't do something right. Let's review, right? So two things. First thing is I pulled out my server.js. I was inside my ./bin folder, right? Under the name www. There was no JS extension. It just said www. I just renamed it to server.js and pulled it out. And then I changed this on line 7 of server.js, the new server.js file that I created. I changed the var app declaration to, instead of the double dot, it looked like this. I changed it to a single dot like this to point to a file that's on the same level. Okay, that's what I did. I had to do that in order for it to work. Okay, that's one. Then I went and changed my package.json file, and I changed the start to node server.js so that whenever I say npm start, it actually does this. It runs this, node server.js. That's what I did. Are you guys clear? Cool. All right. If it runs here, right, our first test, as is, we should deploy as is, right? First, let's test it locally to see if it runs, and I should see express. First thing you should see when you run this thing is express. That's all it says. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go up into Chrome here, and if I run this locally here, if I just go npm start, and if it runs properly, or by the way, here's another thing you can do. You can also do something like nodemon. If you're used to doing that, both work well. If I go here and I go back to my files, and if I go localhost 3000, I should get express welcome to express. Do you get this? If you don't get express welcome to express, something is wrong. This is using the express generator. Okay, cool. So we've got express. Are you okay? You running?
No, I have an issue.
You have an issue? Okay. Want to run over and see if he's got an issue? He's gonna go. Anyone else? Oh, look, Ari, on your side, you got all these people that have issues. Go ahead, take them. Right? Anyone else want? There's other people that need help over there. If there's someone perfect on this side, you know what? The best way to learn is to help somebody else out. So go over there and help those people. Put up your hand if you need help, please. Put up your hand if you need help. I got some people. So there's people over here. If you're good over there, come over and help someone out. It's a good way to learn because you're going to show somebody else how to do something, and then it's going to go through your brain twice, right? Best way to learn is to teach somebody else. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm going to continue, and I'm going to go up on. There's a hand over here. I got a hand over here. I got a hand over here for the people on the other side, right here in front. Lucy's trying to help. There we go. Okay, let's continue. I've got my scaffold, right? It works locally. I want to deploy this to a Github repository because that makes sense to do. Let's do this next step. I'm going to deploy to GitHub. Let's do it. So I need a GitHub repository for me to do that. So I'm going to go up on GitHub. And I'm going to go to, on GitHub, I'm going to go to Georgian. And I'm going to add a new repository here that I'm going to call COMP2068 Lab 3. Right? And then press Create Repository. Yay, I got a repository. And you know what? I don't want to put my all my stuff up here, all my node modules. So I definitely want to ignore node modules. I want to ignore anything to do with Bower components. I want to ignore, if I'm using Cloud9, C9. I want to ignore those things. I want to ignore, if I'm using a Mac, dsstore.dsstore. I want to ignore those things. All of my in my gitignore file. Let's try this out. So inside my folder structure, here in the root, I'm going to go make a new file. This is my first one. And I'm going to make this a gitignore file, right? Here's my gitignore file. In my gitignore file, I want to put in node modules. I don't want to have any node modules up on Git, right? GitHub. I also don't want anything to do with Cloud9 or dsstore. If I'm using a Mac, I don't want anything like that to happen. Also, Bower components would be bad. If somehow Bower components got slipped into my modules, I want nothing to do with it. All right. I also, just to prepare, I don't need anything so far on the front end, but I will. I know I'm going to use Bootstrap, right? So I know, knowing that I'm going to use Bootstrap, I'm going to add a Bower RC file in here. Bower RC tells Bower, which is my front-end dependency manager, to get things like jQuery and Bootstrap and Font Awesome and everything else. It tells us where to put them. Where do I want to put my stuff? Do we know yet? We don't know yet. So using a Bower RC at this time, if I typed in a Bower RC, where are you going to put your front-end dependencies? You don't even know the scaffold yet, right? So let's learn the scaffold. Is my way of telling you. Let's wait for a second, okay? So I'll save. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop serving, right? Notice that my favicon is giving a 404 because there is no favicon, right? I don't have a favicon. We could add that in later. Okay, let's go up on GitHub and deploy there. So git init, yay, it's the steps, right? I'm going to clear the screen for a second. Git add dot, which adds everything. Git commit, these are all things you've seen before. -m for message, and we're going to say initial commit, just like we would any other time. Yay, initial commit. Great, let's get our connection to the repository online. Mine is git remote add blah blah blah, which I'm getting from my GitHub repository that I made. I'm copying and pasting it here in my terminal or command prompt, and then I'm going to say git push -u for unconditional origin to master. Okay, there we go. Boom, and it's going to take that stuff on my local folder and push it up to GitHub. Right? Let's refresh GitHub to see what I got. Yay! And let's add a README file, why not, while we're at it, on GitHub and do a pull to make sure we have a two-way connection. So I'm going to add a README file, and I'm going to say something like, in my README file, it's going to be COMP2068 Live 3, and I'll kind of put a comment that says, example express app using the express-generator for lab 3, and then we'll say COMP2068. Okay? Make sense? Or maybe we'll put it COMP2068 lab 3. How about that? Because that's like, you know, more descriptive. So I'll cut. Okay, there we go. And I'll save this thing down here, just commit the new file. So I've got a new file called readme.md up online. Here it is. And now I want to pull it back down over here. So I'm going to do a git pull just to be on track. I know that this is my last one. I do a git pull. It pulls it down from online. And if everything goes well, when I look at my Visual Studio Code, I see a readme.md with all that stuff. So I've got a two-way, I've got two commits. One that I made for my initial commit, and the second one that I made for my readme.md. Yeah. I want to auto-deploy to Azure. Let's do that piece. Let's check it on Azure to see that my change, that server.js file, works, and that it doesn't give me some kind of, you're not authorized to do this, you know, one of those, or, you know, access denied, or whatever it's going to give you. Let's go up there and try that out. So how do I do that? I'm going to go to Azure, so it's portal.azure.com. And on my portal, I'm going to create a space from my web project, right? Just like we did last time. So if everything goes well, I'm going to click the plus. Again, it can be plus or new. I know that it's plus. Click plus. And then under plus, it's going to ask me for what I want to add. I want to add a web plus mobile kind of container. I want to do a web app. That's what I want. There we go. A web app. This stuff you've seen before, guys and girls. And after I've done my web app, I need to give it a unique name when Microsoft gives me the time of day here, right? I want to make a unique name for my web app, and it's got to be something that's unique across AzureWebsites.net. Okay, if it's not unique, not work. Having all lovely slowdowns today. This is fantastic. Huh? It is. It is very slow. Right? Is it slow on the wired network as well? Are you wireless or wired? Let's mitigate that. And let's see if I can strengthen the connection without breaking anything. Also, what we can probably do is refresh. That might be something to do as well. There we go. That's a little faster. And hopefully that'll give us more of more space, more speed. I so apologize. Yeah, so I'll wait till Azure does that. It'll do this little dance. And it'll come up in a second. There we go. It's coming. Slowly, slowly, but it's coming. I am wired now, so it's not a wireless wired issue. It seems to be even on the wired network. Still the same slowness. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Have you been able to create this yet? Because me I'm on the wired network, and mine is like. Just to test this out to make sure it's not me, another thing I like to do is, and sometimes we have a caching problem, I like to go in Incognito Window. Sometimes that's required, and this is where I would be having to log in properly. Right? So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com. It's going to ask me to log in with my name, and this is kind of a safe way to do it as well, right? And my password it's going to ask me for. It's going to take me first to the Hotmail domain. And then it's going to ask me to use two-step authentication to log in, which again I recommend. Two-step authentication. So we'll try this out. Yay. Okay, so now it's going to log me in, and I should have the same functionality without any kind of caching issue, if that was the problem. I don't think it's the problem, though. I think it's something else, and we'll see what it is, right? Yay. Okay, it's coming up. Let's try this. Plus. Yes, that's good. This is taking way too long. Yeah, here we go. And we're going to go here, and that's good. So on our app service name, we want to make a unique name. So I'm going to say COMP2068 Lab 3, and hopefully no one's taken that. Someone took it. That's fine. So that's okay. For the winter 2016 session, I'll make a Lab 3. That's totally fine to do, like this. And when I do that, I'm going to press Create. I've got a space for it now, right? There it is. And now what it's doing is it's deploying in that space, and when it's done deploying, it's going to take me to the deployment screen, the settings screen. So you got to give Microsoft a chance to finish this deployment, to create the container for you. Otherwise, it's a no-go, right? Did I ever tell you about the no-go, a car that was called no-go in Spanish? No? Anyone want to know that story? It's kind of a funny story, but maybe not so funny. Okay. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I have a he's a guy in the audience, right? I'll take it. He's a plant. He's a plant in my audience. So back in the day, I'm waiting for Azure. There was they made one of the things we talk about when we talk about bad project management is we always talk about the Chevy Nova. Everyone hear the story? Chevy Nova was a really popular car back in the 70s and 80s. Massive, production in the States and so on. It was awesome, and they tried to sell it to South America, right? But what does Nova stand for in Spanish? No go, right? So did anyone buy the car? No. So it didn't go, right? Because it's like saying, hey, buy my Chevy that doesn't go. No go, Nova, right? But for Nova here means Nova, like a Nova, right? So it was kind of cool. And so they always blame project management for that because, that's something they didn't test. They kind of created the name. They didn't care what it sounded like. And now if you notice the new car names that come out, like Civic, what does Civic mean? Nothing, right? It's not really anything. And the same, a lot of the other cars have their own kind of, they make a name up, they make a word up for the car, right? And it doesn't mean anything in any other language. So they translate. Sometimes the car is named differently in different places now, right? It's the same car, like the Ford Fusion is a classic of that. If you take it to Europe, it's not the Ford Fusion anymore. It's something else, right? But it's the Ford Fusion. It's just a different body and some other different features, right? And it's called something else because they don't want to have the same problem. So I have this no-go happening right here, right? Oh, there we go. I just spoke too fast. Hey, Microsoft took care of it. So as soon as I'm done my story, there we go. Okay, so we're up on Microsoft. I've got a space. It's called COMP2068 Winter 2016 Lab 3, AzureWebsites.net. It's kind of deploying. I want to create my continuous deployment connection right now, even though I've got a very simple connection and there's nothing on there. So I'm going to click on continuous deployment. I like to take care of this up front, right? So I've got my connection. I know it works. And if it's broken, I know it's on me. I don't want to test it afterwards and then it's not working. That would be bad. So test and test early is what I'm saying, right? So let's click it. I'm going to click on Configure Required Settings. I'm going to click on GitHub. I'm going to click on, instead of my personal, I'm going to click on Georgian. And under Georgian, I'm going to click on my project, which is Lab 3, right? And then click Accept the Master Branch and click OK. If everything goes well, it's going to set up continuous deployment. It's going to go online, grab stuff from my GitHub, and deploy it here. Let's wait till this thing does its deployment dance until it finishes. And when it's done, it's going to take all my files from GitHub and port them over to Azure, the container, the web container that's going to have everything there. Now it says it's set up, but I'm still going to wait till this is done, right? Because I know for sure when this is done, chances are it's working properly. So you have to have a little bit of patience here. So while I'm waiting for Azure to do it, and I'm going to come back to Azure, let's take care of Heroku, because Heroku can do the same thing. Now, there are some challenges with Heroku. Who's able to make Heroku work? Yeah, there's some things that work on Heroku. There's some things to do to make Heroku work, and one of them is to use a proc file sometimes. Proc file is one thing we need to do, and the other thing to do is specify the version of node. That's what Heroku needs in order for it to run properly sometimes. So those are the two errors we get. Let's go back to Heroku and check that out. So I'm going to go to heroku.com. I'm going to log in, right? And when I go into Heroku, I have a bunch of little applications, right? And what I want to do is I want to add a new one. So I'm going to click plus, new app. And I want to give it an app name, or you can ask Heroku to do it for you. I want to just make it the same name as before. So COMP2068 Winter 2016, right? And we Lab 3, just to make sure that that's good. And click Create App. When I do that, it's going to go and create a space for my app. Notice that it's done. But I need to click Deployment. So click Deploy, right? I'm going to go down and click GitHub. And under GitHub, I'm going to go and choose Georgian. I'm going to search for the repo name, which is COMP2068. So I'll say COMP2068, search. Here's Lab 3, connect. Yay, it's connected. I'm also going to do things like enable automatic deploys. And down here, I'm going to deploy for the first time, deploy the branch for the first time by clicking Deploy Branch. Now watch this thing. It's going to give you some logs. It's going to tell you if there's an error, right? So it's going to go through, trying to figure out what you want to do. It's going to see if it can detect node. It's going to go through my package.json file. Take a look. It's going to launch it. It detects everything, and it says everything is cool. If everything was really cool, if I click this view button, we should have everything working. Let's try it. We're good. So we're deployed on Heroku, no problem, with an Express generated app. No problem. Let's go back to poor Azure, right, and see how we're doing. Hey, we got good on Azure too. Let's test it by clicking this command click and see if Azure's working, right? So I'm clicking command click on Azure. We're waiting for it to go. Hey, we got good on Azure too. Why? Because I'm using server.js. I've pulled it out of my www, the bin file. That www file, I've renamed it to server.js. That's like step one. It'll make sure that things will work properly. If you do it the other way, it may or may not work, right? And I don't want to take that risk. Is everyone with me on this one? You're almost there, right? Actually, no? Who's no? No? You guys are no? You're not with me? Okay, maybe we can, Ari, you're sitting right next to me, maybe you can give him a hand. He's like, what? Huh? What? All right. I think it's the guy right next to you, man.
Yang? Or should I say Q double Yang? That was his Facebook name for a while. So.
All right. So let's modify this because we know it works now. I want to start modifying my Express app so it works like how I want it to work, right? Not how it wants me to work. All right. This is where the changes come in, where you break your code. Let's break the code together. All right. Well, I want to generate some views, and notice that I have a couple of views. I have my error EJS file, and I have my index EJS file. I also have, do I have anything else in there from a routing perspective? My index.ejs file has an index, and notice how I use these percent angle bracket percent equals. And you know, one thing I don't like about Visual Studio Code, and there's only a couple things I don't like about it, I'll tell you right now, but this is one of them. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that it doesn't understand EJS as an HTML template. So down here, in order for us to get code hinting for EJS, we need to go down here and click from plain text when you can move it to HTML. Please change that. And you have to do it every time you look at it, though. Okay, just FYI. If you move away from this, you won't get the code hinting and highlighting that you normally would get. Yes? Sorry? Can I please do? I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. So notice that there is no templating here. All I'm doing is getting this title that's being injected from somewhere. Where is this title coming from? It's got to come from somewhere. So how do I know where it's coming from? Well, a good place to look is roots, right? So if I go into the root folder and I look at my index.js, my path now is index.js in my roots folder. And notice on the top here, it tells you, if I was to look at my index.js, it says index.js roots, right? So roots would be the folder, index.js is the file, and I have this express require. I'm requiring express, so I'm getting this express object right here, and then I'm creating something called a router, and I've got this one path, this one route. Here it is right now, right? Where I do a res render, which is different than res send file, like we did last week, right? But what res render requires some kind of templating engine. And so what am I saying? I'm saying, hey, whenever I get this, if I'm going to the main website, my index, right? I want you to use the index view, right? That's what I want you to do, the index view. And I want you to inject into the index view a variable called title with a value, or a property called title with a value of express. Let's change this. So to prove that, I'm going to say express on Azure, right? Let's just change that up because we just did this, just to show you that what I'm talking about is true, right? So in here, inside of my route, every time I go to the main route, it's going to pump that out on my folder. Yes? Means you haven't changed anything. Nothing to commit means you're up to date. Okay, so I've done this change, right? I've gone and done this piece right here. I've added this. I have a change now that I've made, right? And I want to see the effect of my change. So I'm going to go back into my terminal, right? I'm going to test it locally first and then deploy it to GitHub. And from GitHub, auto deploys to Azure, right? So let's test it locally. So first I want to go and clear the screen. I want to go nodemon. And I'm running. Let's test it in my browser. So I'm going to go to my browser. And this is the wrong one. I want to look at here, which is localhost 3000, and I want to do refresh. So now I should say express on Azure. Do you get this? I got it because I made a change. It made a change to my server file. Whenever I make a change on the back end, on a route, on server, any kind of on the back end file, server.js, whatever JS file I want to use that's part of my server, I need to restart my server. If I don't restart my server, I won't get this. Doesn't matter. However, if I make a change to the front end, the views, I don't have to restart my server. An example of that is if I changed my index.ejs, right? That has nothing to do with the back end, right? So therefore, I can make as many changes as I want. It's just a regular, consider it a regular index.html file, but it's just templated. Okay, so I want to create some templates, and I don't know how to do that. I want to make it kind of like, I want to start incorporating Bootstrap. How do I do that, and what do I do, right? Well, let's take a look at my structure here. Inside my public, I have something called JavaScripts. Inside my JavaScript is nothing, and my style sheets is nothing. I got a style.css. There it is. Here's my style.css. Gives me a little bit of style, right? But when do I access this style.css? This is the hint that you want to see. Let's take a look at my index.ejs. Notice that my style sheet says style sheets. Hey, where the hell is public? I don't see public anywhere because public has been added to the path. And where do we see that? We see it on, this is what I'm saying, understanding the scaffold. You have to understand all the piece parts. Here's a piece part you have to understand. Go to app.js. Under app.js, these are all the modules that we're requiring for my little app. Notice that I also require some roots. Here's my root and my users, which I don't need right now, right? I create my app object. Here's my express object right here, right? Notice I get no code hinting. One thing I do is add in a couple things. I say views, add the views to my path. So path join the word views, the folder views, and add it to my regular path, right? So whenever I say views, right, I don't have to really say views. Ejs is included in my path. So if I just go server, I know that it's going to hunt inside my files to find index.ejs or whatever in my path. It's included in my path. I never have to go views/index.ejs. I never have to do that because of this. Therefore, likewise to this, I have another thing where I do an app use, and I can set up something called an static path. Here's a static path where I use the whole path join mechanism to join my directory name, which is my regular path, my relative path, with the public folder, which means I never have to mention the public folder ever. Hey, this is a great place to put in all of my front-end requirements. I could put them in JavaScripts, right? So all my JavaScript library, I can put them in JavaScripts. Or I could make another folder called lib, just like we've done before, right? And put them inside public JavaScripts lib. Or I could rename JavaScripts and call it something else. Scripts, right? Public scripts, like we've been doing before. We've been scripts and content. We can switch those out. It's up to us. Nothing's pointing to that right now because it's front end, right? Front end, and that's the difference. People can't get that because, what do you mean front end, Tom? Because, you know, it says JavaScripts, but that JavaScripts refers to the stuff that's going to be used in a browser, not on the back end. The back end stuff is inside my routes. It's inside my index, my server.js and my app.js. That's all the back end JavaScript right now. There's nothing else really that exists, right? So when I say JavaScripts, it refers to front end, the stuff that's going to be displayed in my files and folders. Okay, now knowing that, this is a great place to put my Bower RC file into place and rename some of these folders. For example, style sheets is not to my liking. I don't like it. So let's reroute this thing. Let's redo it. So I want to, instead of style sheets, let's rename this style sheets folder, and we're going to call it content. Like normal, right? Content. Well, that means that if I want to maintain my pathing for my index.ejs, I got to change this from style sheets, style sheets to content. All right, that's the first change I need to make. I also don't like the idea of style.css. I hate that word. I want to use app.css. So let's rename that too. So I'm going to go to content and go in here and rename this thing so it suits our function, app.css. There we go. And go in here and change that too. Yay. App. Made some changes. Dangerous, Tom. Great place to check and see if it works, right? Because we've made some changes here. And this is a great way to test how things are going. JavaScripts. There's nothing in JavaScripts. Nothing's being referenced. Let's rename this too. So I'm going to rename my JavaScript folder into scripts. Cool. There's my scripts folder. Yay. So I want to put all of my front-end dependencies, my Bootstrap, my Font Awesome, my jQuery, all inside scripts lib, just like we've done before in the other examples we've used, right? But it's inside of my public folder. So for Bower, not for what we're going to display on the web. I need to do this. Public scripts lib. That's what's got to go into my directory structure in my Bower RC file. So when I do a Bower install, it's going to install all my stuff, all my dependencies in there. That's what I want it to do. Let's do that. All right, so now we have a place for my files to go, right? And I need to create a Bower RC file here. Let's do that. So new file, .bower RC. And inside here, we're going to say control space, we're going to put directory. And instead of Bower components, we want to specify public and then / scripts, capital S. That's what I want to name it, right? Lib. That's my naming structure, right? You can call it whatever you like. This is your scaffold. My recommendation is something like this, though. Okay? Okay, so that's what it is right here. Now, in order for me to launch any kind of Bower front-end components, I need to do a Bower init, just like I did an npm init before, right? When I first started my session. So I'm going to go back down here, go into open in terminal or command prompt, and so I'm pointing to the right folder structure, and then do that. Say Bower init. It's going to go up online and say, okay, let's start doing our little wizard to start initializing our Bower packet, our Bower.json file, right? So I'm just going to press enter. My description is, let's put some description in here, COMP2068, lab 3 deployed to Azure. That's what it is. Enter. You can put other things in there. My main file, I can specify, or I can press enter. Let's just press enter for now. What kind of modules does the package expose? AMD, ES6, globals, Node, blah. Let's just press enter. Keywords, enter. Authors, that's me. It'll be different for you. My license, MIT is fine. Enter. And my home page points to my GitHub homepage. You can make it point anywhere you like. And set currently installed components as dependencies. Sure, but there's nothing there installed. And add commonly ignored files to ignore list. Sure, why not? And now, would you like to work this package as private, which prevents it from being coincidentally published to a registry? Press enter, and press enter again. And notice that it says, hey, Tom, ever since we got together last week, we've updated it to 1.77. What do I need to do? I need to do one of these, Bower update, right? Which is going to go up there, or npm update. npm, it's kind of updates, -g. And this will take some time, so let this do what it's going to do. I could also do, instead of npm update -g, which is going to take a lot of time to do, I could have also done npm install Bower -g, which just installs that one module. So I'll let that do its dance for now. It's going to go out there and do its stuff. And if it errors out, it's okay. And it might, because I'm trying to do stuff here locally on the school, and it may not work properly. So let's just do its thing. So what have I done? So I've created a folder. It's going to go out and create a folder eventually. I've created a Bower.json file here while it's doing this dance. And the Bower.json file is a registry of all my front-end dependencies. And it's going to put things in the proper place. It knows, using the Bower RC file, that I'm going to put all my stuff inside my public scripts lib, right? I don't have a lib folder, but that's where it's going to put everything. But that's everything. That's including my CSS files. Everything is going to be in there, and I'm okay with that. You're going to make some concessions sometimes, because my folder directory structure, I can make it so that it's like, I can make a separate lib folder that has nothing to do with scripts. So there's all my libraries, like whatever. But I'm just putting it under my scripts folder. That's my convention. Let's see if it's finished. Probably not. Yay. It's going to do its dance here and get everything else that I'm going on. Lodash. So this is a great space to take a short break, right? Because we haven't taken a break, and we're sitting at 2:46. Let's take a short bio break while I'm updating my npm modules. And when we come back, we'll continue.